Okay, I know I'm late. I'm very, very late, actually. The last book review was January, February, March, April. The beginning of April. Q2 ended in June, and it is now August. But better late than never, right? I have read many books in Q2, and I have my phone here for some notes, just in case. Let's get started with the Q2 book review. In the last 3 months, I've read 11 books, and I've had varying degrees of what I think about them. They go from probably some of the worst books I've read to some of the best books I've read this year, or of all time. The first book I read this year was The Hunger of the Gods by Gwynne. And if you watched my last book review, you know that I was on book 1 of the Bloodsworn Saga, another Gwynne series where I'm left wanting more and wanting to read the next book almost instantly. Let me tell you, this book did not disappoint whatsoever. I'm wearing sunglasses because the sun came out and it's really bright, so don't think I'm trying to mug. I just can't see. We are following the journey of the rise of dead gods, Orca trying to find her son, and Elvar finding out about her family and what role she plays in this war. In Gwynne's last series that I read, I found themes of found family, fighting for love, and seeking vengeance for things that were done wrong to you, and you're finding these exact same themes here in books 1 and 2. But obviously book 1 was more of a setup. You learn about the different characters at play within the realm. Book 2, you're now seeing these characters meet and how their stories unfold. Let me just say, Orca is legendary. She is such a badass. She is a one-woman warrior, and she's trying to find her son, and she will do anything to find her son. Some of my favorite moments from Orca weren't even her conversations with the other characters in the book or the epic battle she was in. It was the slow moments where she reminisces about her son as a baby and what her relationship was like with her husband. Gwynne really makes you invest in these characters, and I loved how this story starts to really pick up in book 2, and I rated this book a 5 out of 5. And like I said, Gwynne keeps you wanting more, so the second book I read this quarter is The Fury of the Gods. This is the final book in the Bloodsworn Saga, and we are following Varg, Elvar, and Orca in their journey against the dragon god Likrifa. You're coming into an epic battle, war, and we're trying to find out who will prevail between the people who support the dragon god or people who support the wolf god. Gwynne has to be my favorite author of all time at this point, especially in your epic fantasy realm. He takes different characters from across the realm, takes different backgrounds, storylines, and he really merges them together so beautifully. You're never confused on what had happened or what the background behind a side character is. He gives you all of that and more. The world building is amazing in his books, to a T that you're even finding out little bits and pieces of what the characters are wearing, and it's very cinematic writing that makes you want to keep turning pages. I have a double-edged sword with this because I really want it to become some kind of movie. I think they deserve to be, but I don't want it to ruin, what the pictures I have in my brain. It's like that dichotomy of, I want it to be a movie, I want to see it on the big screen, and the battles that he writes are just awesome and epic, but I don't want anyone to ruin it and not adapt it in a good way. This book got a 4.75 out of 5 from me. Moving away from the fantasy realm, I ended up reading just a straight fiction book called All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Crosby. I had read an S.A. Crosby book last year, so I was really enticed to read more of his work this year. In this book, we're following Titus Crown, who is the first Black sheriff in Sharon County, Virginia. He's investigating a school shooting which ends up unfurling a serial killer that is scaring the town. Themes of racial tension, Confederate history, religious confusion, and more are present within this book. I have to say that reading his books always feel like I'm watching a movie. I know that Razorblade Tears, I think, is becoming a movie, and that was my first book from him, which was phenomenal. The start and end of this book was really good. I loved that I couldn't figure out who the actual killer was. The writing, the plot made me wanted to give it a 4, but because there were moments where I was a bit disinterested or lost, I ended up rating this a 3.75 out of 5. I did love his last book a lot more, so I would still recommend Razorblade Tears over All the Sinners Bleed. I had a little beverage. It was really hot outside, so we're gonna do some of the book reviews inside. Welcome to Hyunam-Dong Bookshop by Hwang was one of my favorite reads this year. When I was transitioning between April and May, I really wanted a spring cleaning type of book, a book that makes you feel a bit refreshed, makes you reflect a little bit. I feel like spring always kind of brings that time of transition, and Welcome to Hyunam-Dong Bookshop was a perfect read for the spring. We follow young Ju as she leaves her old life behind and opens up a book bookshop, which was a dream of hers. And we follow her struggles of maintaining a new bookshop in a small town in Seoul while also interacting with the people who come in and out. Their stories, along with her old life, begin unfurling through their conversations, and they find solace within each other and in the bookshop itself. This was such a comforting read during the springtime, especially as someone in her mid-20s. I feel like every year in my 20s has been such a change, and going through those years can be sometimes lonesome and trying to figure out who I am. The questions of who I'm supposed to be, what makes me happy, what society expects from me, etc., all come out within this book, and I think it's really comforting to read. I also really enjoy that it's a short, cozy read in between big books, and I think for anyone who's maybe in a middle point in life or is between paths, this could be a really great option instead of reading like a self-help book. I know I used to be a big self-help lover, and it's sometimes so much information versus a book like this. It's one fiction, but still makes you look at different perspectives, can be really nice. So I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5. I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman has to be one of the most disturbing books I've read this year. It's a story about a group of women who have been kept in a cell for over a decade, and they have no idea how they got there, who imprisoned them, and what's going on in the outside world. The book is narrated by a young girl who has never lived a life outside of the cell. So unlike the other women who are a lot older than her, she has literally no memories of the outside world. She doesn't have family relationships or husbands or an experience with men at all. This book was deeply unsettling in the best way possible. I think after I closed the book, I just stared at a wall for a little while, because even though you go through their journey, you're kind of left with a lot of questions at the end that are unanswered, which I think is on purpose. The book felt really lonesome, even as a reader. The book itself and the journey of the women makes you question humanity and what happens when you strip someone of everything that makes them someone. And since you don't really get a lot of the answers in the end, you sit with this uncomfortableness for a really long time, and the questions of love, loss, society, relationships, those all come up. So I think it's a book I'll sit with for a pretty long time. I may even reread it, just because I think it's one of those books that when you reread it, you learn new things about the characters or what the author is trying to convey. So I ended up rating this book a 4.25 out of 5. I Medusa by Ayana Gray was the next book I read this quarter, a modern interpretation of Medusa's story. Prior to her becoming the figure that we know her to be, it's a story about her adolescence and how she became Medusa. I'm going to issue a trigger warning for this book, so please proceed to read this with caution. I wanted to love this book. A modern retelling of Greek mythology can always be fun, especially for someone that doesn't know the background history behind major characters in Greek mythology. I was mostly upset with how the story was recounted. I understand we're looking at it from the lens of Medusa as an adolescence, but I think with such a heavy topic like SA, it needs to be treated a little better. You're exploring a theme of danger to young girls, especially nowadays, which is very true, and the feminine rage that results as of those things. I think the writing is very YA, even though this book is not listed as a YA, and I think that does a disservice to what the book is trying to portray. I think the impact of how Medusa's story could be told could be so much better, and it just really didn't work for me in this sense. I ended up feeling just really angered by the end of the book, so I ended up rating this a 2.5 out of 5. The Nightingale by Kristin is a story about two sisters during the German occupation of World War II. They have completely different personalities, and they each embark on their own journey during this war. And you see how that kind of affects the people around them and the war itself. This book absolutely broke me. If you haven't seen my video of me crying on TikTok, you should definitely go check that out and give yourself a good chuckle after this. I would also like to say that I recommended this book to my old college roommate, and I did verbatim tell her, this book will make you cry. I have since then received a voice note and a photo of her crying and blaming me for these tears, but I think that only tells you the impact this book has had on the both of us. As someone who has an older sister herself, I closed that book thinking, I need to call my sister and tell her I love her. This book is heartbreakingly beautiful, and the journey these two sisters go on is so engaging and thrilling the entire time. I don't know if thrilling is the right word, because it is like heartbreakingly beautiful, but it does keep you engaged. We often get the tragedies of World War II and maybe some of the key men who play roles in the war, but we often don't get the stories of the women and what happens when their loved ones, their fathers, their brothers, their cousins go to war on the front lines. Who takes care of the children at home? Who protects the family? What emotional gymnastics are they going through during the war? And I think this book portrays it beautifully. It is loosely based on real characters during World War II, so I think it is a very impactful book. I will say that they are making a movie of this. I think it is coming out next year, so I'm really excited about it. I had so many emotions during this book and I can't say enough about it, so I would just say go read it. I rated this a 5 out of 5 stars and I'm very excited to read more from Kristin Hannah. Heaven by Mieko Kawakami tells a story of a young boy who is being severely bullied in middle school by his classmates, and he befriends a girl named Kojima who is also being severely bullied. I picked up this book in all honesty because of the cover and the premise. I thought this would be an interesting read for me, especially because I don't read typically in this realm. However, I was severely disappointed and honestly disturbed by the end of the book. It's pretty short and I think it's to its detriment because even though you go through his journey of his friendship with Kojima and the mental hoops he has to go through with learning how to navigate being bullied, almost like a coming of age story, you end up with an essay on a playground and learning about the narrator's own sexual experience, and he is a minor. And nothing really comes from those two events. So I think it's very odd to write in this way or to write about these topics if it doesn't really add to the story. It just felt very disturbing to me as an adult. And so I rated this book a 1.5 out of 5. Unfortunately, I think the premise is amazing. I think it could have been an amazing story of friendship and or loss if they end up not being friends and he like opened up to her. But yeah, it just overall felt really flat for me. Foster by Claire Keegan is a story about a young Irish girl who goes to live with some relatives for the summer. The book is short, but it just shares her experience between this couple and her family back home who had sent her there because a new baby is being born into the family. For such a short book, it is quietly descriptive. For the lack of verbiage, it still portrays a lot of the emotions you're supposed to feel. I don't want to give too much away, but the comparison she makes between this couple and her family back home is really significant. The little things like holding hands or doing chores with each other or affirming somebody really tugged at my heart because you noticed the subtlety of love throughout the book, and I just really enjoyed it for what it was. I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5. The Poet Empress by Shen is a fantasy story about a poor daughter from a rice field town named Wei Yin and her journey to becoming a concubine for the Azalea heir. However, the prince is very cruel, so now she has to navigate how to protect herself and her family back home while also maneuvering the new workings of a castle that she does not know. Firstly, I want to say this is a phenomenal Asian-based book with a complex magic system that I thoroughly enjoyed. I love how complex the power dynamics get in this book and how the author is portraying Wei to be understanding through trauma while also knowing that the prince is an absolutely cruel monster. It's kind of one of those two things can be true at once. It's a book where decisions that are made have severe consequences and the writing is fast-paced and it's engaging and you're learning new things almost every chapter. I will note this is not a romantasy, even though some places do say it is. It is definitely more of a drama than anything. I would put a small trigger warning for this book in terms of just violence, but other than that, I think it's a really great read, especially for someone who is Asian. I think the little notes of different foods or culture things were just really nice to see in a fantasy book. And I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5. The Heat of the Everflame is the third book in the Kindred's Curse saga by Penn, and I'm gonna issue a slight spoiler warning just in case you haven't read the first 2 books. I would kind of skip this one if you plan on reading it, just because I am gonna talk about plot a little bit, and because you haven't read the first 2, obviously the third one kind of shows some things that occur in the first 2, so just heed my warning. We pick up from the last book with Diem after her coronation and being captured by the rebels. We follow her journey between the Descended and the Guardian and maneuvering between those 2 groups in order to protect the people that she loves. Her and Luther, the MMC, go on a journey across realms and end up learning a lot about her strange heritage. She needs to figure out how to gain allies and build up an army in order to maintain her legitimacy for the crown, because basically everybody wants her off. I needed to read this third book, especially after reading the first 2, but I must say the first 2 are a lot better than the third. The third feels more like a setup to me for the fourth, which is okay, but I think Diem is starting to get on my nerves just a little bit. It feels like everything she does kind of just works out for her, and as someone who likes a little bit of a plot twist or a little bit of stake within these books, it just doesn't feel great when the female main character just keeps winning. Of course, we partly read romantasy for the MMC Luther, and he is starting to piss me off because his unrequited love for her is truly showing in letting her make these rash decisions when he knows way more about the magic system and should be more of a guiding light for her. I will end up reading book 4 when it comes out because I need to see how it ends. I'm already this far in, but I ended up rating giving this book a 3 out of 5. Thank you guys so much for watching my book review. If there are any books that I haven't covered in the last 2, please let me know in the comments below. But also if there are books that I did cover that you seem interested in, please let me know if you end up reading them. Come back here, tell me about them, or just tell me that you plan to put it on your TBR. I will see you guys in Q3, and hopefully I'm not late this time. Bye.